Okay, and welcome to the online health and safety training in the workshop. For social distancing reasons, unfortunately we're not going to have to do this in the class with all of you hanging around, but hopefully you can consult this video if you miss anything out. So this is part of 3 training videos that you'll need to watch. First of all, this is the general workshop practice. You'll then have a video on how to use the bandsaws and the pillar drills and the disc sanders, and there'll be a store housekeeping video, how to use the laser cutter as well. Things might change. Now be aware that we are constantly listening to government advice. We've got to add a whole load of extra things into our health and safety policy due to COVID. So things might change. You need to be on top of what Simeon or Ted might tell you in terms of updates as to how this place works. So we've got 3 videos to watch, which you all need to do. You'll get tested on in a Moodle quiz. On Moodle as well, there will be this health and safety document, which you need to read. The multi-choice questions on Moodle will cover little things inside this document and on the videos that we're going to be doing as well. So it's important to really memorise basic fundamental rules, how to be safe in this workshop. Now, aside from COVID, it's obviously a dangerous place to be, but we've also got to think of the added risk involved in being in a close proximity to one another. So first of all, we've got to think PPE. Now, safety glasses have always been mandatory in the workshop at all times. Nothing changes there. The reason being, you might think what you're doing here is nice and safe. Someone next to you might break a Stanley blade, and it's unlikely, but if it happens, go flying in your eye and you get blinded. So it really is good to wear safety glasses. We are covered by insurance. If you're found not to be wearing safety glasses, there's all sorts of trouble. It's mandatory at all times to wear safety glasses. Now, as well as that, you're probably all used now to being in shops and needing to wear masks. Because we need to be within 2 metres of each other for this workshop to really work, and for me to make sure that you are safe, or Arthur as well if it's a Thursday or Friday, we might need to get to within 2 metres of you to manage the machinery, whatnot. So we all need to wear masks. Now this is probably the last time you'll be seeing me in the workshop, or Arthur, with a group of you. When we're all within 2 metres of each other, I'll be wearing a mask as well, and Arthur too. So hopefully you'll all be getting into that habit. You'll all be issued with a pair of safety glasses when you've done your induction, and 1 disposable mask. Now we don't advise you use that disposable mask, it's a spare. Use your own reusable mask, just for environmental reasons, but you have to have a mask. So we issue that one, which I suggest you put in your bag with your headphones, look after it, put your name on it. Just make sure you've always got your safety glasses and your mask on here. So as well as your own PPE, glasses and mask, there is some shared PPE which you're going to have to get used to how we use when considering the hygiene of it. So these ear defenders, you might be required to use them when there is loud machinery going on, in particular the table saw, which by the way is completely out of bounds to you students, one of the few machines you'll never get trained to use. It's very loud, so those students in proximity, if we're cutting plastic for example, it's particularly loud, you'll be asked to wear these ear defenders. Now it's important you take from this side. You notice this side here, take from this side. When you finish with them, put them here, we'll give them to Arthur or myself, and we will just make sure they're either sterilised, or we'll hang them up here and we'll write the date of the first pair. So that way we know they've been quarantined for 72 hours. Now if for some reason there's lots of loud noise and the rotation of them isn't enough to be 72 hours, you can help yourself to some disposable ear defenders. You might notice me and Arthur are both quite keen to minimise waste, so we don't like using disposable ear defenders unless we have to. They're in this PPE box. You'll also notice reusable gloves for when you're dealing with metal work or anything that might cut your hand, where disposable gloves are no good. Again, when you use these, we need to quarantine them. So you'll notice down here there will be hopefully a slightly smaller laundry basket underneath the coats. Again, if you use a lab coat, an overall, if for some reason you're doing welding or something particularly messy, when you finish with it, just leave it in the box and it'll have to wait a week before it goes back on the shelves. As well as that, obviously we've got to think about hygiene as well as tidiness and good housekeeping in the workshop. So we are going to have to disinfect a lot for it to really work for the time being. The plan is to have, these will be implemented, there's the cleaning station to which as soon as you come in you wash your hands. We recommend as soon as you go out as well, just sanitise your hands as well. There will be sanitising stations at each of the machines, around the machines, which you need to be able to make sure when you press the button the person before you might have had a COVID virus and left that on the on button. So it's important just to take a paper towel, sanitizer, just give it a little rub and make sure the on and off button are safe. Anything you touch theoretically could be a risk. So if you're using the hand tools here, we recommend just giving them a wipe with sanitizer as well. If you're looking in around the tools, for example, you might want to have a little rummage around for nuts and bolts, hand tools, this kind of thing. All down here we've got various tools, scissors and knives, more specialist chisels, bone clamps. Every time you do as Arthur's done just there, just handle it, just give it a wipe as well, just make sure you have sanitised as much as possible. The theory is if we cover enough sanitizer and disinfectant on the offending item, it's going to be sterilised to some degree. We really want to minimise the risk. By the way, using masks as well, there's two protections. One against ambient dust in the air, but also you're going to limit the amount of times you touch your face as well, which is the really important thing. We really need to make sure, especially in this classroom or this workshop, because we're all so close to one another, we really want to be on top of that. So, as well as that, back to the normal housekeeping, there are normally quite a few people in this workshop. It's important to be able to be on top of any clutter and mess, and especially now. So if you create a bit of dust or just clutter, use tools, just be aware as people around you are going to need to be able to share this space as well. So put things away when you finish with them. Put the waste and offcut in the bin straight away. And if you've created a small amount of dust, use a dustpan and brush. Be aware though, if it's a lot of MDF dust or something like that, you're better off using the vacuum cleaner, getting rid of the dust, otherwise it gets airborne. It's another airborne thing to be concerned about in this workshop, it's dust, especially MDF dust. So you'll find dustpan and brushes either side of the workbenches, on this one and these two, that size there. Now sometimes you might be allowed to work without myself or Arthur in the room if we've gone off to do an art related task or something. Simeon will be in the front room, in the main classroom. He's got his ear out, he sometimes wears headphones as well, but he's just going to be aware if there's any trouble. But we also have to make sure when one of us or teacher is not present in the room, there are no power tools to be used. Certainly not the big machines like the bandsaws, exceptionally high risk, but any other portable power tools have to be left, or go and ask Sim, see if it's okay for him to come in and supervise you whilst you're using the machinery. Right, those of you with long hair, tie it back. Anyone with more than shoulder length hair, for obvious reasons, needs to make sure it's not going to get in the way of anything turning around in particular. There might be a risk with bandsaw, but the real dangerous things are the pillar drills. Even hand drills. You might have seen some YouTube video of some girl trying to eat a corn on the cob on a drill spinning around, and this is the result you'll see in the picture. So it really is important to keep anything loose, necklaces, wristbands, that kind of thing. Make sure they are tucked well away, out of the way. Lanyards as well. just pop them under your shirt like that if you can, or tuck them in if you've got a t-shirt, something like that. This leads on as well as jewellery and clothing to what you're wearing. Now it's a good idea to wear not your best clothes. So we can't be held responsible if you get glue on your favourite shirt or anything like that. It's down to you to make sure that you're going to wear clothes that you don't mind potentially someone else getting glue on. You also want to make sure you've got good footwear. Now we've got steel toe cap safety boots, but we really recommend you wear anything stout, like a good pair of Doc Martens or walking boots. Tough trainers, thick trainers, just about acceptable, but thin plimsoll type things, not really. And any sandals, open-soled shoes, forget it, not in here. Okay, I know it's tempting in the summertime, but it's just the way it's going to be. Also, just to keep the ventilation, both from dust and potential virus, we keep the windows open and the extraction on as much as possible, which means it gets quite cold in here. So we really recommend you wear warm clothes as well in the winter time. Wear clothes like you'd be outside, because you probably feel the same temperature in here. Minimising dust and fumes, like I said, we try and keep the dust to a minimum here just for health reasons. You'll notice these machines here are all connected to extractor. So whenever you use this machine, and we'll go into them in more detail in the other video, make sure the dust extraction is on at all times. Now it won't cover everything in the room, so when you're hand sanding, you get quite a lot of dust build up around the vices when people are cutting stuff here. Just come along and hoover it up as soon as you finish with it. Okay, make sure that we keep the dust to a minimum. I mentioned tidiness as well, partly because of the number of people using the workshop at one space. But it really is important if you can clear it up as you go along. Now we find ourselves doing a lot of clearing up after you, and to be honest we'd rather use our expertise to help you with a stuck problem, or some other student might need help, but if we're going to be running around clearing up after yourself, you're not going to get as good an education as if you let us do our expert advice for you guys. So please help us to help you by being on top of the mess. Right, make sure you have plenty of space around you with power tools and machinery. Now this was a rule before COVID, but obviously do bear in mind each other's personal space for obvious COVID reasons, but also for safety reasons. If you're using a power tool, like a higher risk power tool like a bandsaw, you want to make sure you've got 1.5 meters behind you. If you run into trouble with this and you need to jump back, it's no good if someone is encroaching your space here. So don't be afraid to just ask if someone can just move so you can use this machine safely. Okay, same applies to any of these static machines, but if you're using a portable power tool that is high risk, make sure you have plenty of space around you to make sure it's safe. Okay, sorry, going back to dust and fumes, I mentioned dust, but it's important to bear in mind fumes as well. Now, we've got a first aid box and a cosh cupboard here. It means anything kind of solventy gets kept in here. The general odour, you probably notice it when you open it. It's just good to kind of keep it away like that. We'll also keep the doors, the windows open, keep as much ventilation as possible to get rid of any of these ambient nasty solvents. But you'll find over here we've got a paint spray booth in here. We often get students to use this for very strong solvents. So car body filler is often done here because it gives off a lot of polyester, styrene based solvents, not particularly good for your health. Obviously aerosol spraying as well. The reason is it's got an amazing extraction. So you might not be able to hear me so much because it's very loud, but pushing the green button down here gives so much an extraction you'll actually set the classroom door open if you put it as well. So we normally leave the window open by the laser cutter, and that will give a good through draft, especially if you're cutting on the laser cutter. Now, again, we're going to go into the laser cutter in more detail, but it's really important, it's vital that you know not to cut anything you want on the laser cutter. The main reason is toxic gases. The worst offender is PVC. Now those of you who might know, it's actually quite an un-environmentally friendly plastic in the first place. We try not to use it as much as possible, but it's absolute no-no in the laser cutter, because as soon as you burn it, it gives off toxic chlorine gas. A lot of the particles are picked up in this three-stage filter underneath. Again, we'll go into this in more detail in the laser cutter training, but whenever you use it, it's got to have the extraction on. Okay, so that's a little bit more about fumes. Obviously use that extraction booth if you're going to do anything with a high solvent content. And the dust, like I said, if you've got some face covering, it's going to reduce the amount of dust. We've got the extraction as well to make sure that is extracted as much as possible as well. Right, the other thing to do is, what if there's an emergency? Now, you might find someone else is running into trouble or doing something wrong. You're absolutely encouraged to warn them if you see something that might be going wrong and we're busy elsewhere, we haven't noticed it. Go ahead, there's no harm in just telling them, are you sure that's okay? Make sure that's going right.
And go.
It's important also to know where the room emergency stops are. So we've got one there, one over by the extraction control, so don't get confused with the two there. One over by this pillar drill and the disinfecting station, and then one over on this side. Now these will kill all of the power in the whole room, so be ready to use them if you see someone else running into trouble, for example. You'll notice over on this side we haven't got emergency stops for the whole room. The three machines there are enclosed machines and considered relatively safe. You'll notice these machines have their own emergency stops as well. Now also, when using the bandsaw, the pillar drills and the distander, you'll notice they all have these mushroom stops. Obviously if you run into trouble, you can kick it like that. You'll find some of them click in, this one won't click in, but the bandsaw one means the bandsaw won't start unless you reset it. So don't get in the habit of using these normally, they're just for emergencies, but be aware that where they are. This machine also, the older bandsaw, you'll notice it has a, switch it on here, it also has a brake, so if you hold your foot on that, it'll speed up the stopping of the blade. These machines don't have them because actually the blade is braked electrically and it does slow down a bit quicker than this one. So this one needs a foot brake as well to stop it in more of an emergency. Okay, we've got, as well as emergency stops, we've got eye wash there. If someone gets anything in their eye, there's eye wash. And then you need to know what to do in the event of a fire. So, we've got a fire blanket there. There is a small reusable fire blanket for dabbing out potential small flames in the laser cutter. This is the most likely fire risk, although welding as well can be quite a fire risk. And then there are two fire extinguishers over here. There's carbon monoxide and a powder fire extinguisher. Now you're not expected to know how to use these. Those of you that might know, carbon dioxide is for electrical fires. Powder is a good general purpose fire extinguisher, but generally it's not expected for students to be the firefighters. If you see anything larger than a waste paper basket size fire, the general rule is to get out, but the main important thing to do on the first thing you notice a fire is to raise the alarm. Raise it with a member of staff, i.e. myself or Arthur, who's most likely in the room, Simeon or Ted, whoever's nearest, and everyone around you, and then get out. Okay, so we've got, across the college we've got these fire evacuation posters. I'm sure no one really looks at them across the college, but it's a good idea to know how to get out in the likelihood if there's a big fire, you can't get past this this door, then you might have to go out through the store, and if you can't get through there, you might have to climb out of that window. And then of course you go and make your way down to the bottom of the car park by the bus stops. So it's important to know what to do in the event of a fire, but don't feel like you need to be a hero and try and put out the fire yourself. All too often these are inadequate for a large fire anyway. I think that's all right.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.